Very warm welcome to talk about an issue that affects us all, and that is the intergenerational wealth transfer. You know it, we've said it before, it is underway. In Australia alone, $3.5 trillion in assets will change hands by 2050. So, succession and planning for it. To tell us what he has on his mind, Travis Schindler from Hewison and Associates joins me now. Travis, nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, it's hard to sort of get your head around the absolute magnitude of this wealth transfer that is ongoing right now. Is it something that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis in the advisory?
Good morning, Nadine. Thank you for having me. Absolutely. This is a theme that it's no longer coming. It's already here, and it's something that I think the advice community has been dealing with for the last 5 or 10 years. And as you mentioned, the Australian figures are at least 3.5 trillion over the next 20 to 30 years. On a global scale, it's somewhere close to $100 trillion of wealth transitioning from one generation to the next.
Okay, so when you think of, well, do we start with being proactive or do we start with the pitfalls? Like, where, I suppose, are people even starting this process in a little bit of bother?
I think if we start from the very simple situation of people not starting the process at all, we see many situations where it's a very emotional conversation, thinking about what happens to your assets when you're no longer here. So a lot of people delay and delay and delay, but it's really important to start thinking about those situations in advance and critically to seek advice. Often that involves dealing with a wealth manager, estate planning solicitor, a tax advisor, or accountant. To make sure that the whole of life is considered in that succession plan.
Okay, and so, well, if you don't have that succession or you don't have that plan in place, does it just start with a will? I mean, is that the simplest starting point?
Yeah, having a will is probably the most basic document that's needed to ensure that you've got at least something in place to make sure what happens to your assets when you're no longer here, and ensuring those assets land up in the hands of those that you want it to. So a will looks after estate assets. Something that we see in advice is superannuation. Often that's not being considered in the will. Many people don't realise that it's not an estate asset. So superannuation does need very specific treatment to make sure that it is being considered from a holistic perspective.
Okay, interesting. So that is a particular sort of agreement that you have, or it's another document that you complete?
It depends on what someone's individual circumstances are and what their family situation or testamentary wishes are. But yeah, there's a document, a binding death agreement or a binding death benefit nomination. There's various titles for the document, but ultimately that document caters to what do you want to happen to your superannuation when you're no longer here? Do you want it paid to your estate? Do you want it paid to your spouse or your independent children? So look, there's a lot of pitfalls with superannuation. Something we see is, clients wanting to say, I want my superannuation to go to my grandchildren, or I want it to go to my friend. But unfortunately, under superannuation law, they're not eligible beneficiaries. So it is complex, and the need for advice is real.
Yeah. Okay. So is that financial advice? Is that a specific estate lawyer? Like, how does this sort of funnel of advice, I suppose, all come together for something like estate planning?
I think it crosses over into both, estate planning, so legal advice, and financial planning advice when you're dealing with superannuation. But ultimately, it is more estate planning advice, and any well-rounded financial plan does involve succession of assets, including personal and business assets as well. Superannuation obviously falls into that. So I think, getting the best outcome for a client involves having multiple professionals working to deliver the best outcome from a taxation, wealth management, financial advisory, and estate planning perspective.
Hey, just before we let you go, Travis, what is a family constitution, and is it always needed?
It's not something that's always needed. It's more so relevant when there's, I'd say, significant assets or multi-generational wealth involved. So, look, a family constitution is something that you probably see more so in the family office space, but it provides guidelines as to how defines the objectives of the family and outlines how the family wants to make important decisions. Has conflict resolution within the document. But effectively, it's not something you'd see in day-to-day estate planning, more so when there's significant assets or wealth involved.